Good evening, Brother Eric. Good evening, guests. And I am delighted to be here because up until 5 minutes ago, I was having a little problem with my own internet connection. And here I am, not disappointing this evening. So I'm very grateful at the moment. Welcome, everybody. And I'm so looking forward to this evening because we have a very special speaker, someone I just adore for her wisdom and her strength. Sister Gayatri Naraine is no stranger to you if you've been coming all of these weeks. And coincidentally, not only is she our delegate, head delegate to the United Nations, but is there anyone in the audience who knows what yesterday was? It was actually, I guess you can't speak to me at this point in the program, maybe later. But yesterday, November 16th, was the UN International Day of Tolerance. And what Sister Gayatri will speak about this evening is tolerance. And I know from the brief conversation we had that she will take it on many, many levels. And I think you know that what we do here on Thursday evenings is bring it all down to what can I do in my home? What can I do at the dinner table to show tolerance to people I often am perhaps intolerant of, whom I live with on a day-to-day basis or work with. So we have a very, very broad, wonderful evening. I will tell you what I learned today is that UNESCO, which was formed after World War II, was formed in order to promote peace and focus on restoring us as a world internationally to recover after the devastation of the war. And many countries, including the United States at that time, was especially dedicated to making sure that education was back on the map, that kids everywhere had a chance to get an education. And UNESCO stands for, the UN's focus on education, science, and culture, and in an effort to promote peace. And of course, that involves tolerance on every level. So yesterday was that special day, and I believe it was 70 years ago that this was formed. And I read a nice quote today, we're more connected than ever, but we are not more understanding of each other. And we certainly know during these trying few years, especially with the COVID pandemic, we have been in closer contact with things like Zoom, and we are just here for each other every day. But at the same time, we've developed severe pockets of hatred. There's a great word, xenophobia, fear of strangers, on a political level, on a national level. So here to discuss what we can do to become more tolerant on all levels, global level, personal level, is our own delegate to the UN, Sister Gayatri. And she has indeed devoted her entire life to bringing her spiritual solutions and endeavors to any situation that she is bringing her incredible knowledge to. So she also serves she's vice chair of the United Nations International Day of Yoga Committee, and focuses on her own personal development and growth wherever she goes. And she has studied Raj Yoga and has taught meditation. It's an understatement. She is one of our senior teachers here. And without talking anymore, let me introduce to you or reintroduce to you Gayatri. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise, for that beautiful kind of context setting of tolerance and the United Nations declaration of observing a day of tolerance. And then, of course, it came under the auspices of UNESCO. And when we think of the word tolerance, of course, I always say tolerance is a very misunderstood word. It is a word that we feel bothered by, so much so that we say, enough is enough. And I just have zero tolerance with what's going on in the world. But we do know that from a spiritual perspective, tolerance is indeed a very powerful, it's a power that we talk about. And so today, what I'd like to do is to look at tolerance from the perspective of two quotations. But before I go into that, I want to give you the theme for 2022. Yesterday's theme on tolerance from the UN was describing tolerance as respect, describing tolerance as acceptance, describing tolerance as appreciation, but of what? Respect, acceptance, and appreciation of what? And of course, it is of the world's cultures, because of course it comes under UNESCO, and part of UNESCO, the C in UNESCO is cultures. But it also calls on respect, acceptance, and appreciation for our forms of expressions and the expressions of the different ways of being human. And I thought that was very, very interesting, that tolerance is actually the torch. It is that shining light that when it's focused on the individual, it brings out an appreciation for the unique forms of expression and ways of being a human. So ways of a human being. And I thought that actually captured for me where tolerance begins and where it ends. And that is why, as a power, a spiritual power, it is like a torch that shines on our different forms. We are so different in terms of our physical bodies, our physical ways of expressing ourselves through the colors and the features and the language and the expressions and all of that. But then when it goes way beyond all of the things that define us that are physical and material, actually it shines on something that we actually have together, and that is being a human being. So when it shines into that deeper space that goes beyond everything that makes us different from one another, there's actually a core that is not so different. And that core is of being the soul. We may be unique, but our uniqueness is actually expressed in a sameness. We all feel happy. That's a common thing that human beings feel: happiness, joy, peace, love. So that's where our commonality lies. But of course, it's expressed in unique ways. But we also feel sorrow. We also feel a sense of loneliness. We also feel a sense of being excluded. We also feel a sense of sorrow, a sense of baselessness. But again, it's a common thing that we share. It's a common human experience. So I think this torch of tolerance is appreciating everything that's different, but also taking us to accept that there is a core within us that perhaps is not so different. And tolerance could help us see that in ways that we would be able to live better as human beings, being different in bodies, but very similar in the way we express our souls. So I'd ask Eric if you could show the first slide that I've sent you, slide 1. Now, this is a quotation from a former Secretary General of the UN. I would say the late Secretary General of the UN, because he left the body a few years ago. But he was the one who actually, to me, encapsulated what tolerance is at this level of the core light, which is the soul, the human being. So he said that the inspired motive that I want us to take into this first part of looking at tolerance. So the inspired motive, what inspires me, what motivates me in an inspirational way to want to practice tolerance. So his quotation, I think, captures a beautiful inspirational motive, and that is, ignorance and prejudice are the handmaidens of propaganda. Our mission, therefore, is to confront ignorance with knowledge, bigotry with tolerance, and isolation with the outstretched hand of generosity. So take a look, take a moment, and read that quotation for yourself. Thank you, Eric. So when we look at that quotation, how can I apply that to my life? How can I be motivated and inspired to say, you know, ignorance and prejudice are slaves of propaganda. They are the handmaids of propaganda. And so how can I move away from these illusions of ignorance and prejudice? Because it is darkness. It is an absence of light. So I have to redefine a mission now. What is the mission of my life? And so on a spiritual path, we would say the mission of our lives is to confront ignorance with knowledge. And this is what a spiritual path is all about. How can I use the light of knowledge in order to remove ignorance, to remove the darkness of ignorance? Because prejudice is a form of ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of understanding something. And so how can I redefine the mission of my life so that I can live a life not being enslaved by my own ignorance and the prejudices that result from that ignorance? How can I accept the differences of people? How can I appreciate those differences of people? Now, if I see tolerance as something that, oh, I have to fit into this, or I have to put up with this, or I have to bear the burden of this, but I really don't want to. And there's a lot of bigotry in this world, and you're asking me to tolerate it. Well, that's a form of ignorance and prejudice. Because if we could get rid of people in the world very easily, then we wouldn't need to tolerate. Because it's easy, just get rid of them, just liquidate them, just get them out of our way, because we don't want to tolerate such behavior. We don't want to tolerate a species of people who have done us so much harm in the past. We don't want to do all of those things. So this bigotry is darkness. So tolerance would mean I have to understand something spiritual that would allow me to be and let others be. And to be, it's easy for me to defend myself and protect myself and said, okay, I'm important. I'm sacred. I am this and I am that, but the others are not. So I don't want to tolerate them. But the spiritual understanding is we all came here onto this stage, which is called the stage, the drama stage, that we are all playing our parts. So tolerance, instead of having bigotry against people that I don't understand and I don't like and I don't identify with, so I'm categorizing them and putting them in boxes. Tolerance is understanding that everyone who happens to have a body, who happens to be a human being on this world stage, has a part to play. And every human being is contributing something to this world, even though I may not be seeing it. What I'm seeing is a certain behavior, and what I want is to get rid of them because of that behavior. And so that is what tolerance is. It's based on a deeper understanding of a spiritual knowledge that breaks through the darkness, the light of which breaks through the darkness and makes sense and meaning for me to accept things as they are and to tolerate, of course, but with a deeper understanding. And for me, that means tolerance is giving people space to be who they are without undue expectations that I impose on others. And then the isolation to get rid of isolation. And isolation means there's a lot of loneliness in this world. And there's a lot of exclusion in this world. So how do I, stop this? How do I become an instrument so that I can make a difference in people who feel excluded and people who feel lonely? If I can't do it physically, even at a level of my soul, when I'm hearing and reading and seeing the news of the exclusion, of the discriminations, of the loneliness that is taking place in this world today, can I, with the generosity of an outstretched hand, welcome them as a brother, as a sister, welcome them with that deep sense of a bond that as souls, we are all children of one God. So I think that is what the quote is motivating us to do. And so for me, if I were to take that at a spiritual level and look at how will I practice this, now I could take that quotation and I can go into my reflective space, which is what we do as meditators, and I can now begin to make sense and meaning of it. And I take it into my meditation, I take it into my silence, because I want to know, how do I first look at it, look at that quotation within the landscape of my inner self? How would I show up doing those things? And where will I draw the strength from to do it? Well, I would recommend to you that when you look at how can you respond the way Kofi Annan is asking us to respond, and you're taking it now into a spiritual landscape of your soul, I think you would look at tolerance from a perspective of two pillars. And the two pillars, one pillar would be peace and one pillar would be courage. And in between the two pillars would be this line is like a clothesline of tolerance. So tolerance is connected to peace, and tolerance is connected to courage. And now I'm going to hang the virtues that would be required from within me in order to move from my foundational experience of peace, because as soon as I say Om Shanti, what I'm saying is that I am peace, my soul is peace, my nature is peace, my feelings are peace, my thoughts are peaceful. And then I use that as foundational to who I am, this Om Shanti being. And I'm looking at this string, this lifeline of tolerance, and I'm seeing that it's now going to be connecting me to courage. Because to be tolerant in today's world, from a spiritual perspective, requires a courage to do it. And I think that courage is a very powerful virtue to have. Because what is courage? Courage is calling me to do that which I don't think I have the strength to do. It's calling me to do something perhaps I've never done before. So that's when I need courage. It's calling me to transcend the limitations of what I always thought about myself that I couldn't do, and to do it. So I would say, in the contemplation of that motivational quote, look at the peace that you are, look at the courage you need to have, and then hang whatever it is you need to do on this lifeline of tolerance. And so I think the first piece that I would hang on the line between peace and courage would be the behaviors that I need to have. And the first behavior that I need to have is a behavior of having no expectations. You know, we say that on a spiritual path, if you really want to be effective, give up having expectations of others. Because I think that when you have expectations of others, it blinds us to anything that would make me connect to something in the person that is of value. Expectations is I'm imposing what I feel others should have, and I'm not seeing them for who they are. I'm not seeing what they have. And so that behavior stops me, because even though I have the peace within me, and I said, I'm going to act from this peace. When it comes to acting from the peace, my behavior stops me in the track. And that behavior that stops me in the track is the behavior of having expectations. So the courage here is to let go of the expectations. And so this lifeline of tolerance would be, what are these expectations I have of others that I cannot tolerate them? And each expectation is connected to my behavior. And that's what I have to remove with the torch of tolerance. So I'll have to look at each expectation, and with peace in my soul and courage in my heart, I remove the expectations, and I'm removing them from my behavior. And each expectation I remove, I will be able to tolerate. I will have that torch of tolerance which allows me to see through the ignorance and to see through the prejudice and to extend that hand of generosity. So I'll ask Eric now to put on the second quote. Now, the second inspirational quote or motive is a very beautiful one by Bertrand Russell. And it is a simple one because it's touching our lives as it is today. And it says, love is wise. Hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, Zoom, internet, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. But if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity, a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet. So let's take a few moments and read that in the quietness of your soul. Take it into the silence of your soul and read it again. Thank you. Eric, you could take off the slide now. So with that inspired quote, I was thinking, what would be the two pillars that would hold the line of tolerance? And what would be hanging on this lifeline of tolerance between the two pillars that would be connected to our behavior? I would see the two pillars connecting this lifeline of tolerance in relation to that quotation. One pillar would be love, and the other would be acceptance. And so between these two pillars, there is this lifeline of tolerance. What is blinding me, even though I say to myself in my meditations, when I'm in a space that makes me feel beautifully that this is a world in which we need to live together in harmony. We need to live with a sense of charity. Charity means a give and take, a sharing, a caring. All of these things we accept. I don't think anyone on this Zoom tonight, anyway, would say that on my spiritual path, I don't feel this kind of love for humanity. I don't feel this kind of love of wanting to live together. Of all these 193 countries plus the territories, wouldn't it be lovely if one day I wake up and the whole world is this beautiful paradise in which everyone is living together in harmony? I think we all have that. And because we have that vision somewhere hidden inside of us, and it's slowly revealing itself as we return to our authentic self and our true self, we begin to love. We begin to love that authenticity and that truth within ourselves, but we also begin to love it in others. And so we want it. And then we begin to see, okay, if I want this for others, and as we were saying, we want to apply this in our own living rooms and on our own dining tables and in our own communities and in our own classrooms where the kids are. If you happen to be a teacher, there's something else that I need to have, and that is acceptance. Now, the acceptance is something that is incredibly important if love is going to be sustained in my relationship with another. And normally, in a family setting, we tend to say, yes, I love the members of my family. I even accept them for who they are based on their idiosyncrasies or based on their beautiful uniqueness. But there's something in me that isn't tolerating them. I'm not able to tolerate them. And yet I love them very much and I accept them for who they are. So the two pillars of love and acceptance with the lifeline of tolerance, or what is the behavior that then blocks us from really, truly being able to tolerate? And that is conditions. Because when we talk about love, we also love to say, my love is unconditional. Well, as soon as there is a condition imposed, then I'm unable to tolerate. And so the spiritual, skillful behavior that is required to support that beautiful quote from Bertrand Russell, whether that living together and being closely connected happens at the level of the family in interpersonal relationships, happens at the level of my workplace, happens at the level of my extended family, happens at the level of my community, my neighborhood, whatever that may be, that living together. The reason that the tolerance is not being expressed, it is because I have a condition that I am imposing on the relationship. And when that condition is imposed, I'm unable to tolerate. So looking at the lifeline between love and acceptance, I would say, let us look at all the conditions that we place on our relationships that make it difficult for us to tolerate. Because I tell you this, if I'm unable to tolerate in a one-on-one interpersonal relationship because of a condition, that same behavior will show up if I'm looking at something on my screen, looking at the news of the world, and listening to someone saying something that I don't like. I don't like what that person is saying. And the poet is saying, people will say things that we don't like. But how do we tolerate? It's that when I remove that condition and said, you know what? That person is the person that he or she is. And it doesn't matter if I like or don't like, it's not going to change. It's not going to make a difference. So what do I do in order to tolerate that person, even though it's foul language, even though it's abusive language, even though it's language that is something that I would say I have zero tolerance on? But how do I tolerate it? In other words, how do I make sure that whatever abusive language I am hearing that I don't like is not disempowering me, is not taking away my power from within me? And if I become attentive that, that person is what they are, those people are what they are, that person is who he or she is, and I'm not going to allow them to make me into who they are, because I am going to protect myself from being influenced by it. But at the same time, I wouldn't have a condition imposed on them that they would change because I want them to change. But what I would have is a good wish for them, or a blessing for them, or a pure feeling for them, and say, change because you should recognize something that is worthy about you You should recognize something that is special about you. You should recognize something that is more than just those filthy words coming out of your mouth. So you will have that good wish for them. And so at the one hand, you're loving them. You want them to be different. On the other hand, you're accepting them for who they are. But then the lifeline of tolerance is saying, don't have conditions based on your rejection of what they're doing, but have a good wish or a pure feeling based on something you would love for them to see in themselves. So I think that I wanted to give those two examples because I feel that is what tolerance represents for me and what tolerance means. So I'll stop there, and maybe Louise would like to.
Maybe, maybe. Whoa, I have such a long list of things and I keep scratching off as you answer them all. But I want to pick up just, if I may, and I really need to invite the audience, if you would like to put anything you'd like to ask or say to Gayatri in the chat box or the Q&A. Oh, where do I start? You just said that I have to recognize something worthy about myself. And the one elephant in the room tonight is that my perspective, is that old man ego that's afraid that I'm going to lose something. I'm going to lose dignity. I'm going to lose reputation. I'm going to lose somehow if I have the courage to protect my inner self. And what I'd like to do, with your permission, is bring a specific example, because I always like to bring it home with something specific for our audience. And something happened. This is so coincidental. Every time I MC with you, some little example comes up the day before. It's amazing. But I'm going to bear with me. I need to give you a little bit of detail, but I help kids write college essays. That's what I do professionally. And I have a boy who wrote fiction and tried to pass it off as a real college application essay. And the moral dilemma I was in was, obviously, how do I participate in making this sound authentic? And it felt very compromising to me, but it was due the next day when I found all this out. That dilemma I put aside, and I was able to do what you were describing. I was able to realize the sadness that an 18-year-old young man felt so empty of something to write about himself that he felt he had to make it up. And I was looking at the arrogance that was in his rough draft that I had to tone down so they would like to take him to Boston University. So it was a sculpture, and hopefully they learned something from it. But here's what happened. There was an issue of payment and money and with the mother and all of this, and it began to keep me awake a couple of nights ago. And what I did was I got up in the morning, I'm cutting to the chase, and I meditated, and I went right to Baba. And the minute I realized that, when I adjusted my expectations, when I didn't listen to the voice inside of me and at the dinner table that said, oh, they're going to have no respect for you if you compromise your situation here, your money. And when I let that go, I established a peace within myself because I had the courage to do that. I was able to not only see the commonality, I mean, I'm just ecstatic with this. I hope I explained it well enough. I'm trying to not take too much time here, but I was so happy that I could see him and see his mother as not the stereotypical threat to my reputation or nonsense. I was able to really feel that commonality that you spoke about an hour ago, 45 minutes ago. And I was able to this is the important part. I was able to find my own peace, PEACE. And it was right inside of me all the time because I was now living under that canopy of protection. And there was no anger in it. There was no trying to teach him something, tell him how he should, would, could. It was gone. Now I
So
think
you
that's
removed all the conditional, the expectations that perhaps manifested in your behavior toward him and his family. And so where it landed you, which is an interesting thing, is in your peace. And then the courage to do what would be in his favor. In other words, something that would be helping him. But if we don't go into the silence of the soul, for the soul to look at what's hanging between the peace and the courage, which is tolerance, and what's hanging on this lifeline that is stopping me from shining that beautiful torch onto the life of others through my own life. And because the light of tolerance is always to uplift, it's always to show a better person while recognizing their weaknesses. And so, yeah, your story did demonstrate that.
It was just incredible. And I slept like a baby last night. And I'm just softer. I can talk to him, talk to the mother. And I sent her a very simple text. I would be happy to work with your son till the completion, period. No explanation. It's a new me. It's a new me from the training here. You know, I'm about 6 years old here, and it gets very exciting to develop that kind of courage, because I think that all of my acquired things come from fear of loss of something in society. What about though, you know, we talked about, what if the behavior of countries or people, take it on any level, really violates your sense of right and wrong, your morality? How do I tolerate when the expectation is not just due to my ego or needs? What do you do in the face of real, unfair? Yeah.
Well, you know, what the spirituality say to us, when I change, I see changes in my world. So it is an awareness that would then connect to your perception. And then that perception will connect to your vision, the way you see something. So if I look at the world and I am looking at a particular country, because you see, the world is a big place. The world is made up of countries. Countries are run by human beings. Human beings are driven by their prejudices and their ignorance, right? And when that get applied, and I see it, and I reject it at the level of disgust, that's something I don't support, so I wouldn't tolerate it. But and this is where the silence is very interesting, because if I know that I don't support something, but I don't have the spiritual strength to take a stance on it, and I'm too afraid to speak up against it, then that is the tolerance that people don't like. Because what I'm tolerating is something I don't like at the level of recognition, but I'm too afraid to speak up against it. That is not tolerance, right? So I feel that if there is something I don't like, And something that I see, it's bringing out kind of a distaste. The spiritual word is distaste. Then I have to take a spiritual stand, not a moral stand in terms of who's right and who's wrong, but a spiritual stand that this is a truth that I must uphold as a principle of life. And when anyone asks me about it, I must have the courage to speak from that inner principle of truth. And that would be the torch of tolerance, because because I can speak for my inner principle of truth of what I stand for, then even though it exists in the world, my stance of saying this is what is truly authentic to me is allowing me to tolerate that.
Yeah.
And it's not suppressing me. And when something suppresses me from being true to myself, and I cannot speak up about it, that is the tolerance people don't like. Because it's a tolerance that suppresses. But spiritual tolerance is say, no, you stand up for who you are, stand up for what your truth is, speak up, but do it respectfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Not with anger.
Not with abusive force, not with a force that would disempower you.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we look at the world today and we look at all this mess going on and intolerance, and we just look at it, and I find that no matter what's going on, if I can maintain my inner peace, the world may make it difficult because they're going to say, I don't care. What do you mean you don't read the news from cover to cover? I am the guardian of my peace. And I find that people, don't you love me? If you did, you would behave the way I think you should. There are many, many levels of unacceptance. And I'm thinking of how he's such a cliche, but Nelson Mandela in prison all those decades was really by not suffering, by reading Invictus, was it? And by taking himself on that plane of spirituality, was able to do so much more than tolerate the confinement. He was not in a prison. His prison door was open because his spirit was there.
Yeah, but you take that to a recent, our world. Okay, Nelson Mandela was an extraordinary person with extraordinary spirituality in working apartheid out of the world. Out of his country to begin with. But you take the COVID crisis and you look at the beginning of COVID, they told you it originated, it was something, all these theories that were out there that originated in China, and it was brought here, and it has a specific, all these things. And you look at it on the news, and whatever you're seeing on the news, you then take and it creates a narrative inside of you. And now you're saying, okay, they said this is a virus that was brought out of China, and you live in a community of Chinese. And you walk out and you're seeing Chinese, whether you're in a plane with them, or whether you're in an airport with them, or whether you're in a store with them, a shop, or whether you're on the road with them. Can you be a Nelson Mandela? Because you see, the thing about tolerance is an active spiritual power. Tolerance is not something that you just, this is why it hangs on peace and courage. But it's a power, it's a spiritual power. It's a tool that you use in your life. So even though you were told all these things that conditioned you about a set of people connected to a virus that was spreading rapidly, and you walk out there, how do you mingle and mix and live in harmony with those people without judging them, without blaming them, without having these undue expectations that they should get out of here because they are the reason for the virus. And so to me, that is the day-to-day thing we have to deal with, is how can we turn around the narrative in the soul through spiritual knowledge so that the torch could shine, so that we could live in harmony and we could naturally express tolerance with people who are being blamed, but it's got nothing to do with what they're being blamed for.
Yeah.
And so that for me is tolerance. And I don't have to look up to a Nelson Mandela. He's done a great job. But how do I look at myself when I live and being conditioned on a daily basis with ignorance and prejudice that then affects me to such an extent that I blame innocent people for things that they are not responsible for?
Yeah.
That is intolerance.
Yeah.
And so how does tolerance express itself? And it's got to be something very active. I've got to be aware of it. So I can't lip service it and said, you know, I could live in a community with Black people, but I'm not going to look at every Black person with a lens that see them in a way that they would harm me.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to live with Hindus or Hindus with Muslims and lip service and say, I love all these people, but you know what? They have harmed my generations of people and they're still harming. So we're blaming people for things that we're being conditioned with, and that is intolerance. So tolerance means, no, it's love and it's acceptance. You give them the benefit of the doubt. That's a form of tolerance, and that's an active thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to say that you mentioned courage before, and I have a greater understanding right now of what that really fully means to me, because one thing I've learned is that it's much more comfortable to feel angry than to feel anxiety. And so I may consider myself to be the good guy, or I might consider them to be the bad guys. But in both cases, many people I find in my lifetime of experience will resort to anger and hatred because it's so much easier to take an action or to feel that I'm in control or to scapegoat someone. So the big enemy when it comes to having the courage to do what you're asking is to be willing to face the anxiety of the situation and believe in yourself. It comes down to the self-respect again. Believe that you have the capacity to create within yourself that inner space that you spoke about. It's really hard.
Well, it's not hard, it's easy.
Yeah, we
Because
know.
if I'll just end with this story because I know we're coming to the end of this session. It's like last week I was on the New York subway, and there was this young guy who came in on the train, the carriage that I was in, and he began shouting and swearing, and he was very angry with the world, very angry with all of us on the train. And he was saying all sorts of things, but he was well-spoken, right? He was well-spoken, and he was like giving this long lecture to us, this beautiful lecture, but all filthy words. And I was sitting there, and then, of course, I started saying, okay, Baba, what should I do here? You know, here's this guy, he's so distraught, he's so traumatized. And then my attention came off of him and was looking at all the people in the carriage. And you could see some of them were talking and making comments about him, and some of them were looking at him, and some of them were looking away from him. And I could almost feel telepathically what was going on, even in those who were not talking. Then he got to the stop in which he was getting off the train. And of course, the train doors take like a couple of seconds to open. It doesn't open immediately when the train stops. So he started banging on the door and to get it open, and of course started swearing. And of course, again, these people started talking about it, saying things about him. And then there was just this 1 second that I said, it was as though I emerged this person in front of me after he's left the train. And I said to him, you know what? No matter what these people are saying and thinking about you, you're not that. You are this beautiful soul. You are a child of God. And I realized then that that is one, no matter how bad someone is, what is it they want from us is just that one drop of something that no one else is seeing in them. And if I can give them, this is the training that Baba is giving us, that if you could give them that one drop to quench their thirst, because they are parched people, and you can give them that one drop, it may go a very long way, because you may never see him. I may never see him again. But who knows what that one drop would do for him. And I think these are all ways that tolerance works. Because tolerance, we don't need tolerance if we don't have the opposite of love, if we don't have the opposite of courage, if we don't have the opposite of appreciation, if we don't have the opposite of understanding. We don't need tolerance. We need tolerance because we need to deal with the opposites of what it is we want in the world. And then we have to train ourselves over and over and over to believe that ultimately, or not even to believe, but to experience it in a living form, in a way that's really practical, to apply it, and then to have faith in the victory of that application. And you may never be able to measure it. That's another thing about tolerance. You can't measure it.
Beautiful. I know the hour is late, but we do have a few comments in the chat. I don't know if you'd like to glance at that and just see if there's anything there you'd like to address before we close this session. Is it visible? Yeah. And while Sister Gayatri is looking, you know,
I
if
think
there's
there's
anyone...
just one, and it's quite an interesting one. It is at a recent community supper, a fellow diner began exclaiming Bible quotes to prove only those who follow Jesus Christ are on the correct path. With 8 billion people, with 8 billion on earth, this is mind-boggling. How to accept the person while shocked by the limiting view. I think the way that you would accept the person is, first of all, the person is a human being. The human being is a soul. The soul is a child of God. Now you accept the person on that basis. And then now what you're not accepting is a behavior that, that you describe. You were shocked by the limiting view. So if I were you, I would do this exercise. I would look at, okay, here's my brother soul. I have love for him. On the other, and that's your pillar of love. The second pillar is acceptance. Okay, now I need to accept him because he has a part that he's playing in this world that I cannot change. And then on your lifeline of tolerance, look to see what shocked you by what you describe as a limiting view. And then you hang it on this lifeline of tolerance. What was it that limited your view? Because your vision was limited on the basis of what you experienced from this person. The person wasn't limiting, but your vision of what you experience, you describe as limiting. And with each, you might have 2 or 3. Don't try to fill your line with many. Just try to see what is it that was limiting in what you saw. And then you transform that limiting view into something unlimited outside of that person. Because people are always entitled to opinions. but opinions are not true. Opinions are opinions, and he's having an opinion and he's voicing it out loud. So a person's opinion shouldn't limit my truth. And so if I feel there was a limitation within me, then I have to identify it and then transform it. I would do that little bit of a check and change exercise.
Beautiful. So beautiful. It's just incredible. And the good feeling of being tolerant. I just want to put in a commercial for how good it feels when you have that inner power. And as you said, doing it practically, you have to experience it. Once you do it, if you're sitting here thinking you can't do it, just think of what you would want if you were the person that Sister Gayatri is describing, or if you're in a situation where you really don't like the way you're being treated, just think of what you would want and give it away. Give it to someone else, right? Tolerance. Thank you so much. I don't know if you need to go, I just want to make a quick announcement.
What about
Audience, that
meditation? Are we having a little
well, wait,
bit?
I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
We are not meeting next week. I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. And then I would love to ask Sister Gayatri to do a little meditative commentary. If you need to leave, Om Shanti, we'll see you in 2 weeks. If you'd like to stay, would you be willing to give us a few minutes now, Sister Gayatri? Take us out with a nice meditative commentary for closure on the evening.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's all sit comfortably. Center ourselves in the remembrance of being souls. The soul is a being of light. And one of the powers in this light is love. Is patience. Is courage. Is acceptance. When the soul is aware of this light, the light becomes a torch of tolerance. This light of tolerance takes delight in the essential differences that exist in our world. The torch of tolerance is learning, and learning about differences in opinions and attitudes can be a delight. Tolerance is recognizing that part of life's exciting variety is not something to fear, but to be curious about. The torch of tolerance confronts ignorance and prejudice with wisdom and understanding. The torch of tolerance removes isolation with the outstretched hand of generosity. The torch of tolerance recognizes that love is wise and hatred is foolish. The torch of tolerance is vital to the sustenance of respectful relationships. The torch of tolerance shines through the darkness of doubt, of anxiety, and of fear. Tolerance is respect. Tolerance is acceptance. Tolerance is appreciation. Of each other, of interpersonal relationships, of those in my family, of those at my workplace, of those in my community, in my city, in my country, and in my world. Most of all, the torch of tolerance doesn't curse the darkness. It shines its light. Om Shanti.
I don't want to speak. I just want to thank you for shining your most unique light on all of us and enlightening us this evening. So beautiful. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Om Shanti. See you in 2 weeks.
Very good. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Thank you, Sister Gayatri. There wasn't enough time. We'll invite you back. And Louise, as always, it's wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Tolerate your Thanksgiving as best you can. Om Shanti.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Will do. Om
Free the
Shanti.
turkeys already.
Sherry.
Can we get the recording for this this session?
Yes, it should be on our website and YouTube.
Thank
It's,
you.
we've made it a little easier to find these things.
So it's on the website
Very
right
powerful.
now, or it's recorded right now on the website or YouTube?
No, it'll probably take a day or so, but if you have a problem, call Harmony House. They'll help you out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Om
So
Om
happy
Shanti.
Thanksgiving to everyone. Stay
Thank
Happy
safe.
Thanksgiving. Om Shanti.
Thanksgiving, very powerful. Thank you, beautiful. Om Shanti, really powerful. Happy
Thank you. That was wonderful.